Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Thank you so much for being here. I hope your holiday season is going well and you're having a good time. You're imbibing and enjoying yourself, living a life full of pleasure, but doing so carefully and smartly. Or whatever. Today's episode, I'm joined by a friend and colleague of mine named Molly Cofman. I've first met Molly, I think it was probably like 15 years ago, something like that, in when I was working in Chicago. And she is now married, living in Tuscany, traveling around the world, leading retreats. She's an acupuncturist, a yogi, really thoughtful and incredible human being who really sees the world like through an artistic lens. And I had a great conversation with her. I think you guys will enjoy it. And you can follow her on Instagram at Inspiration Heals. Her website, inspirationheals.com. And without any further ado, let's welcome to the show, Ms. Molly Cofman. And we're live. Hey, Molly.
Hi, Jim.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me here.
It's always fun to have like an acupuncturist here. We can talk shop and just kind of shoot the shit. And we were, before we started recording, we were talking, we're just going to get into it. We were talking about music and the power of music and in particular, like in ceremonial settings, you know, and ayahuasca was what we were talking about. But I remember I've talked on here quite a bit about different Native American ceremonies that I've done. And I worked with a Blackfoot medicine man. Mm-hmm. And he was amazing. He's an amazing teacher, especially for people that were like beginning. Mm. And then I went to college and some of the other people that I knew from the Blackfoot medicine man had got started into working with some people from the Lakota tradition. Mm. And when I asked my friends, what's the change? They said, well, we wanted to learn the songs. Mm. And the Blackfoot man, as amazing and grateful as I am for him, he didn't really know the songs, you know? And there's something about that kind of the power of song and especially in ceremony, which is just so incredible, you know? And
so powerful.
So what has that experience been like for you, learning some of the traditional songs?
Well, music in general is such an interesting thing because if you even just think about normal life, how powerful an influence is music, right? It brings people together at the disco. It is something that you do at your pool party. What do? You put on music, right? It's something that by its very nature is a connecting force. And for me, I suppose as my explorations in both traditional Chinese medicine and then specifically yoga have grown, there is an element of understanding these traditions that continually brings me back to music, to rhythm, whether it's just drumming or raising voices in song. And I suppose the most beautiful and fascinating discovery that I've had is that we can all think of a time when, I picture myself as a teenager. I was so stubborn and so unruly as a teenager, but, I would fall asleep listening to light rock, to love songs. And there was like some weird kind of addiction to the way that it would make me feel, because it would make me feel. I don't know if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think
Any
all
songs
of us
in particular that come to mind?
Oh my goodness.
I'm putting you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot. I'm not exactly sure, but you think like Air Supply and Journey. No, really? I'm sorry, guys. I'm not only dating myself, but right, like these songs where you're singing them as a teenage girl and like fantasizing about your knight in armor, how love will feel or how life will feel, right? And you're using this catalyst and this river of sensation to fantasize about what life can be like. And I don't know that there's anyone who would be listening to this podcast or anywhere in the world that can't find one example in their lives, right, where they've played the favorite song over and over, or they've played the breakup song
Right.
over and over, right? Either to have the power of transformation to get past some element, or just to be sort of a welcoming, nourishing presence. And what's really beautiful that I'm discovering about this ceremonial tradition of music is that it does have this portal of emoting, of expressing. When people raise their voices in song together, there is an immediate connection, one to each other, two, to the greater community, three, to the power that music has for transformation, which we've all tapped into in some way or another. But the songs of ceremony are songs that have either come from thousands of years of tradition. In the yogic tradition, right, we talk about mantra, which comes from the Sanskrit language, which is healing sounds in and of themselves. But the actual songs are created to have a particular transformational energy. And so you get all of the stuff that we all naturally tap into with music, but the music itself is a healing entity. And the power of that and what it has the capability to do, especially in a ceremonial setting, is incredible. It's a really incredible, powerful sensation and experience.
I love that. Ever since Wyatt, my son, was tiny, I'd be sitting with him with in the Lakota, they call it the Chinupa. It's a pipe ceremony, right?
Yeah.
And so I would sit there and we would do it, and he'd like help me fill it and stuff. And it's just like, it's like it brings me to tears every time we do it, And one time he was here and he was like, "Daddy, I think we should do a Chinupa," which was just like amazing.
Wow.
And then
He brought it up.
his mom is an opera singer, and we were talking not too long ago, and she said, she said, "I think it's time for Wyatt to learn the songs." She goes, "I think it's time for you to teach him the songs." And I was like, "I'm not a singer." Yeah, I was like,
wait. For all of you listening, everyone is a singer. Okay.
Yeah, but I have a hard time keeping the tone,
Okay.
whatever. But, but it was just an interesting thing where even like, with whatever the sort of like history that his mom and I have had, for her to just be like, "Hey, it's time." She goes, "I try to teach him some, but it's like, he does this with you and all that." And
It's a connection you have.
And it's like there's just something about that, especially in ceremony. I mean, the ceremony itself is like to call you, for me anyway, it's like it calls you back home.
Yeah.
And then to have the songs that also you can sort of ride on its back to get there. It's just so beautiful.
Well, and a piece of that really touches me is that this time of year is a holiday time of year. And as a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, I used to, in my newsletters, and I used to do very seasonal type of subjects. But what has become interesting for me as I travel around the world and work is that, like yesterday, I sat down to write a newsletter, and I'm getting back to ritual. I promise. It really will come full circle. And I started writing about winter. And then I was like, oh, but all of my friends in South America, they're just entering summer. And so how do you play with these entities? But the nice thing about the quote unquote holiday season and what's beautiful is that all of the world religions and everyone has something in this season that they're celebrating. So to me, that's quite beautiful energetically, because beyond the bounds of whatever you decide to believe, there's some sort of collaborative celebrating going on this time of year. And what comes with celebration is this idea of ritual. And what is ritual? I think that the word you used was really grounding, really rooting in. And this, above and beyond just the songs, or, taking this moment with your son over and over again to not only connect, but to be connecting within the power of something that has been a tradition for who knows how long, is just the practice of ritual itself, and how beautiful it is, and how simple it can. You and I are talking about these sort of bigger, grander, tribal, communal type of rituals, but waking up and lighting a candle as a ritual to ground you into what it is that you believe about life, or what type of person you're hoping to be each day, or what your intentions are. We were talking before we started, right, about mindfulness,
right,
about the simplicity and beauty of paying attention, and how we can, I think as I'm traveling around and talking about these, I don't know if you remember actually, but I did my first sweat lodge with you.
Oh, no way.
And the Blackfoot tribe. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Years and years and years ago, which is kind of a neat connection also to be talking about these things. But definitely, I'm traveling to Brazil and you had access to these things, and not everyone immediately has access to these more ancient traditions necessarily, but part of the accessibility of that is this, and I'm talking with my hands like a true Italian, is just the beauty of that ritual and how rooting and grounding it can be, whatever you decide it will be, or if you're calling from a particular tradition. In yoga, the lighting of the candle is an honoring of our teachers, and when you really extrapolate on that, you're my teacher sitting in front of me right now because I'm learning something from you, and perhaps I yours. But just this sort of daily or monthly or weekly gathering of thoughts in some dedicated action is such a powerful way to remind ourselves to pay attention. And then you bring that to a larger scale. You get in touch with a tribe, you bring the music in. And of course, these are all facilitators that just raise the vibration and create different opportunities within that ritual. But I always like to remind myself of the simplicity of the thing. And how we can remind ourselves, in everyday life too, how to access some of the power of that.
One of the things that I'm thinking about as we're talking about this was the only time I've done ayahuasca. There's something about psychedelics and the perception of music in particular that is to me, just the coolest. I can't even describe what it's like when, you're on that journey, and then there's music, but I remember when I did the ayahuasca the one time, there was, the first time that I purged, it was I saw this snake that came up and it looked me in the eyes, and then it just lunged at me and bit me in the throat. And I just I was purging.
And you had a healing.
Yeah, I had a healing. And as I was there, there was two kind of facilitators that were there, and they came over when I was facing the bucket, and then as I went back, and they started playing, they started singing some songs. And it was one of the most powerful sort of musical experiences I've ever had, because I didn't know, I don't know, I still don't know what the intention of the song was, from that tradition. I didn't really want to know too much because I just wanted to experience. I didn't want to have that cognitive thing. I just wanted to have
the heady part.
Yeah. And, but I remember the feeling of being so nurtured and cared for. And it was as though I could see kind of the melody, flowing through me, and then I had this, the whole thing was crazy. But it was so cool. But it was that, it was I was on the verge of it potentially getting really intense and not in a cool way. I felt like I was being pulled down to the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. And my intention going into it was I want to learn about love, just to celebrate love. Not even learn about it. I want to celebrate love. Jenny and I had just been getting together, and it was fun and all the things. Yeah. And I was being pulled down, and then they start playing the music, and then it's just it let go. And I came back up to the surface, and then there on the shore was the ayahuasca vine. And it was beautiful. It was well done. Yeah. Here we are. What would you like to know?
Well, it's amazing. And so the beauty of the music in rituals like this, and you mentioned the psychedelic. We often, when I'm in South America, we don't really talk about the medicine in this way. Can it have psychedelic properties? Of course it can. If you go on Dr. Google, you can find all sorts of crazy things about these different Amazonian medicines. But one of the ways I suppose we like to try to describe it is either a third eye opener. So, expanding beyond the logical mind so that we're seeing what is actually happening in life beyond what we're often trying to perceive, to feel in control of life. And so there is always that element of, am I losing control? Where am I going? Do I know where I'm going? Am I diving deep into the tar, or am I, choosing? And there's always choice in that. So that's quite beautiful. But I like to think of the music almost as the river of the experience, right? The river that's carrying you through that moment in life, and really it becomes every moment in life. And music is all of life. The foundation of life is vibration. And music is such an incredible celebration of vibration, right? It touches, and I guess it kind of gets back to that teenage thing, right? There's something about the music that just goes straight into the heart. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to know what the song is. I mean, how many of us sang songs from the 80s that we thought we knew the lyrics, and we were singing completely the wrong words, but it didn't even matter, because the power of the song wasn't actually the words. It was the rhythm and the vibration and whatever effect that was having on our body. Right. And so the musical traditions and these rituals are so beautiful and so powerful, because if you stay connected to it, it will carry you. And it will continually connect you to the very source of life, which is vibration. As that beautiful celebration, you could even say that music is love, in a sense, right? Just the beauty of bringing together the vibrations in a certain way. But the way that I like to think of it is just that river that we have access to at any given point to continue flowing through life. And when we hold onto the rock in the rapids and we're trying to survive that way, little by little, we understand, like you said, dive deep down. I've had a few experiences in ceremony where literally I'm swimming through tar with monsters around me. And of course, it's just me. It's just acknowledging these parts of me that typically I don't acknowledge. But when I forget to connect to the music, when I forget to open my mouth and try to sing, that's when I feel like I'm drowning. And when I remember to just stay connected lightly to the power of the music, to the power of that vibration, whether I know what it's talking about or not, is when I'm able to really transform those moments during an experience like that. And I think it's probably a good, beautiful reminder for life as well. Just the idea of flow. It's something that's so popular, isn't it? In the last 2 decades, probably, in some beautiful books and discourses about flow. But life is movement. And when that's coordinated, it's flow. And that's what music is. It's a coordinated celebration of movement.
Well, that's what I love about Chinese medicine. I mean, at the core of its philosophy is about movement. It's like things should move. Things that are healthy move. Like rivers and ecosystems that are healthy have movement. And when things get stagnant, that's when it turns into something that's not so fun to be around necessarily. That preserves those bogs, right? That just preserve dead bodies for thousands of years, and it's like there's not movement there, that we would think of, and so always getting back to, even when I'm not practicing that much anymore, I'm always thinking about movement, and how do we move, and what I really appreciate about the experience with whether it's ayahuasca or mushrooms or meditation or essential oils, all of the things, even yoga, right? And Tai Chi and Qigong, it's just ultimately there's this kind of question of how do I want to move? How am I moving? How do I want to move? And how do I move more gracefully? And, where they both provide where they all can provide some sort of pattern interruption. The thing that I appreciated about ayahuasca, and that I've only done it once because of it, is it was just so jarring. It's it might be the most jarring kind of pattern interruption that somebody can opt into.
Well, it's really the most powerful mirror I've ever experienced, right? She asks you to look at yourself with utter honesty. And so there's nowhere to hide. There's no story to tell. There's no costume to put on. And that is often why can be a challenging experience. It's an incredibly beautiful experience, but it's a pretty incredible, powerful mirror of honesty that we invite in for ourselves when we partake or join a circle. But I, like you, obviously, because we share this passion for traditional Chinese medicine, and within every tradition that I've studied, including the medicine tradition, including the fact that the music is the portal, right? It's movement. It has to be movement, because all of life is movement. And where I think we get a little tripped up sometimes is like, you're saying you have all of these ways of discovering and reestablishing movement in your life, but where is the point where we can start to recognize where we disrupt it for ourselves too? And can we tap into that place a little more quickly so that all of these tools that we have, whether it be in ceremony or using Tai Chi or using yoga or going for a walk or gardening or whatever it is that invites movement into our life, right? Can we bring that element in a little bit sooner when we understand that our river is going toward the class 5? Is there class 5 rapids?
Yeah,
does that exist? Okay. I just made up a number because I don't know, but.
Yeah. So what would you what are some things that you've seen in your own life, or maybe that you help your clients and people you interact with to identify when they're out of flow, when the flow is disrupted, or when things are not moving in a healthy way?
Well, it's, we live in an interesting world because we are inundated with logical information all the time, right? I mean, even when you're scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, right, your mind is making up stories about what you see to digest the information. But I am, as hippie as it may sound, I'm a huge advocate for learning how to listen well, because the body gives signals all the time. Whether it's a physical pain or like right now, I have this problem with my back, right? And so obviously my body is asking me something. I am being a very bad patient and not really listening to it. So that's a whole nother story because of some obligations. But the thing is that when we either find ourselves in an environment that isn't conducive to the flow that we're establishing in our lives, or we drink something or take something, or we were just discussing, right, our passion for essential oils and that experience of you pick something up and it's, ooh, that just doesn't feel good, right? These are all beautiful and actually very powerful signals for us to pause for a second. And the tendency of the mind is that it wants to immediately label, it wants to immediately find a sense. But what the best tool, and this is something that yoga and Buddhist meditation is helping me to cultivate in my own life, is being able to pause in those moments and listen without judgment to what's really going on. And it's not an easy thing to do because often we're 10 steps past the initial signal, right? So it's a beautiful kind of humbling process of, can I recognize it in the moment? But I don't know any human being that I've ever come in contact with that hasn't had some experience, or probably hundreds or thousands or millions, right, in our life where we know. You feel it in your stomach, you feel it in your heart, you feel it on your skin, you feel it on the back of your neck. When something isn't going right, there's an immediate signal. And so it's finding the right tools for you. And I mean, I've found yoga. I know that you're also in the realm of the a little bit yoga because you came to my class yesterday and did a phenomenal job. But there are many different practices and tools that people can tap into. So it's not only those, but to help heighten our ability to recognize these moments and signals that the body is giving in any given moment. And if we're able to pause for a split second longer than we normally do, then we also usually are able to make a decision to re-engage in flow rather than continuing on in the direction that obviously isn't resonating with where we need to be.
Great. You talked about environment, and I love that because that's something that I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Must be part of our Chinese medicine training, right?
Maybe.
But it's, how would you sort of counsel or give feedback or suggest somebody to differentiating that line between this is just flat out an unhealthy environment for me, versus I'm encountering some resistance. And this resistance could be precisely what I need to transform or to grow. But to find that, it's sort of like the do I stay, do I go question.
Right. Oh, and even when you even pose that question, I get, no, but I mean, really, because all of us have been in that place, right? Where we're just treading water because we feel something isn't going well, but we're not sure if it's our relationship to the thing that needs to change or the thing itself that needs to change. And this is one of the sort of quintessential questions in what we would call maybe spiritual growth, or I don't love the word progress, I guess, in life, because I feel like in our modern mentality, we think of this as like higher or better, or but I know that it's a reasonable word, progressing in our understanding,
right?
Maybe. And the thing is that I don't actually know a formula to understand. But what I do know is that usually when we're in that situation, we have stopped. When we feel that sensation of should I stay or should I go, something that we're doing is stopped. We've put the brakes on somewhere. And so it's in those moments, and it's not so easy to say, you know, we're talking without, I guess, a general sensation. Well, actually, I mean, I can give my own.
Right.
So I'm in a really interesting situation where I married into a family right now that is completely in disarray and very dismantled, fighting, et cetera, et cetera. And so my entering into this, unbeknownst to me when I entered into it, has actually suffocated a little bit my ability to do the things that I want to do in life, which is an interesting place to arrive for, you know, an adult who's already in some ways fulfilled and manifested and started to walk down the path that I know that I would like to walk down. And for a year and a half or so, I completely went into suffering because I exactly found myself in that trap of, I can't find a way to change anything in my situation, but I also don't think I want to leave my situation. So what do I do? Yeah. And it was like one of the most excruciating. I felt suffocated. I felt confused. I felt, I don't even know. But what I wasn't considering in all of that, and it took a few different things to sort of shake me up. And in fact, it was a few ceremonies, rituals, different things that allowed me to untrap my thinking, was that why does it necessarily have to be one or the other? Yeah. Right? Can I open the door that says, I don't really want to dishonor the commitment that I've made to my family, but I'm not going to survive if I can't continue to follow this other voice. So can I find a way to do both? And I know that's not exactly answering your question, but I think that a lot of how we get stuck is just not being able to see another perspective to a situation, right? And that's where the stop actually comes. It's not a stop in our action. It's not a stop in something that's happened. It's a stop in our brain that says, look, there's this and I don't know what to choose. Yeah. But we often forget that there's like option C, D, E, F, G, F, you know, and until infinity. Yeah. And in fact, the minute, and it felt scary to me the first time I said, well, actually, I'm going to go away now for a month because I need to go and do this. And it felt terrifying because in a relationship, I had never really experienced nor that kind of trust or that kind of freedom. And yet, luckily, the relationship sustained. And the minute that I stepped away and said, okay, I need to follow this, but I'm not dishonoring this other thing, things started to really transform in my heart, and I started to feel alive again. And so I don't know if that helps to kind of distinguish. It's I suppose it's a little bit of a vague example, but I mean, it's the thing that came first to me when you said that. And I think we can all relate to times like that in our lives where it's like we're not, the pain of leaving hasn't exceeded the pain or hasn't lessened from the pain of staying kind of situation. But often what we're forgetting is that there's something completely beyond what we're able to see. And again, going back to even these rituals, these practices, lighting the candle, remembering what it is that we're really going for in life. And is there something that we're not seeing? This consideration is such a beautiful mindfulness practice in a sense, right? What is stuck here? Is it really that I just need to get a new apartment because this apartment is humid and it's creating allergies and this, right? There are some straightforward situations like that, or this relationship really isn't good for me and it's the relationship, or am I just in a situation where I'm not offering myself something beyond what seems very evident that's already there?
Yeah. The way I think about it and the way that I've been coaching, like shifting from just straight up clinical practice to doing a lot more relationship and like love and personal coaching has been a tremendous kind of evolution, because the needles do their thing, and so to be able to get a huge outcome without being able to put needles in people is like, it's different.
Yeah.
And what I've come to really appreciate is that so often the suffering that we encounter isn't really related to what the external actions are. It's the way that we do them.
Absolutely.
And so, like, when I'm thinking about listening to you talk and thinking about, like, how would I answer that question? Part of what I realize is that something that I'll ask myself a lot is, like, I just try to keep it really simple. It's like, is my energy, or I'll ask my clients, is your energy contracting or is it expanding? And it's like, if you're feeling stuck and you can ask yourself, like, where might my energy be able to expand in this situation? Like, that's a good kind of like, cookie crumb to follow, and to see where that might go. It's like, how can I expand here? How can I expand here? And I was reading, as you were talking about the family stuff and the Buddhism, I was reading Thich Nhat Hanh. I don't know how you say his name. Yeah. He's got this book on the 4 keys of communication or something. Have you read this book?
I have.
Yeah, and he talks about one of it is like, sort of like rule number 1, remember, or like, guidepost 1 or whatever is like, they're suffering. And then like number 2, like, you're suffering, and it's like, oh shit. Okay. And it's like, if you both approach each other knowing that the other one is suffering,
absolutely,
then you can just kind of acknowledge that. And then, something that I talk about all the time on this podcast is about how, like, I set my aim a few years ago to just be kind. Like, and that's like my main purpose now is like to bring a good mood wherever I go and to be kind. Because in my marriage, like, I wasn't kind in the first marriage, it was like there were places where that left me, and I was like, got very afraid and very narrow, like, myopic, like very just nearsighted about certain things and, the suffering and stuff. And I really appreciate that. I mean, I'm not a Buddhist. You should talk about it, but it's like, the sort of like the ultimate focus on suffering has never been something that I've really resonated with. But I loved it in the context of like, how do you communicate well, especially in intimate relationships? And it's like, all right, let's just start. You're suffering. I'm suffering. I'm fucked up. You're fucked up. Yeah. We're all fucked up together. Okay. Now, like, let's talk about it. Like, I'm sorry I didn't empty the dishwasher or whatever,
Yeah. No, but but I love this because it's such a practical way to approach something that becomes so highly emotionally charged, right? And it's a funny tendency of our minds, is that someone does something that doesn't resonate with you well, and our first response is like, oh my God, he's mad at me, or oh my God, I must have done something wrong. And not only do we forget that the person who, first of all, that it's probably not related to us at all, right? Probably zero to relate to us, but the fact that the first reasonable assumption could be, oh, this person must be really having a tough time, right? And in some realm. Yeah. And then, knowing that we are also vulnerable creatures, just like the person standing in front of us. And the kindness thing, is also really important to me, is it's such a beautiful, simple practice. Like, can I just walk through my day and be kind? And the transformational power of that is incredibly impactful. And we fall from grace all the time. There are, someone cuts you off in traffic. Or actually yesterday I had a really funny experience driving on 95 because I'm not used to American drivers. Anyway, yes, thanks.
Well, we can call Miami drivers American drivers.
And so, of course, there's a woman going 40 miles an hour in the fast lane. Mm-hmm. And I'm behind her and I'm breathing because I'm trying to get to teach. So, of course, that's in the back of my head. And at a certain point, finally, traffic opens up and I pass her and she's talking on her cell phone, not with headphones, like holding her phone. I don't know what the laws are here in Miami. And my first reaction was, get off your phone. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing my brain said is, Molly, even if you do it silently, it still counts. Like sort of this,
so
I don't know.
Well scream it and get the release.
I mean, more or less, right? But it was I don't think it's ever happened for me like that. Like almost as if a teacher was standing on my shoulder. Like even if you do it in your head, it still is the same thing, right? Like what are you putting out there? Right. You're putting out the vibration that is anger toward this person that on some subtle level they're going to feel, even if I didn't say it, right? It's pretty incredible. Right. Who knows? Her daughter could be having a baby and she's on the phone with a daughter who's at the hospital having a, who knows what this could be. So this, the rule of thumb of just walking into life and doing our best to be kind, I think is a really beautiful manifestation of you're suffering, I'm suffering. Can we just be soft with each other? Mm-hmm. And it opens up a window to sort of what we were talking about before, which is being able to be available to any perspective that it might actually be. Mm-hmm. Rather than making up some perspective that is a reaction of some psyche habit pattern that we formed, God only knows when. Right. And so it's a really beautiful rule of thumb.
And being open, like I love that phrase, open to possibilities. It's I have this client now that I'm working with, and I think she said she was raised Baptist. And she's she works in she's a public servant basically, and she talked about how we were kind of talking about happiness, and I realized quickly that happiness was like too far of a reach for her for where she's at right now. And so it's like, okay, or how about peace, and calm, like some sense of ease internally, right? Happiness, I get it. Sustained happiness is impossible.
I mean, some of us don't even know what happiness is. Like we don't even know what it means to us. It's big. And
so, and she was just like, I'm not even sure that I believe that that's meant for me, or that that's even a good aim in my life, because I was just raised that you're here, you're of service, and then you die. And it was a challenging call for me, but I loved it, because it just kind of took things down to like a very sort of like brass tacks kind of thing. And where we left it at the end of that particular call was like, okay, are you open to the possibility that perhaps you can incorporate ease in your life, and that from if you're feeling more ease and flow internally, that then you can be healthier and be of service longer and more present with the people you're serving and all of that. It's like, and she was just like, I think that might be okay, and so it was like the homework for that week, among other things, was like just to practice that affirmation of I'm open to the possibility that I can have ease or grace in my life. And when we're feeling really stuck, sometimes it's just even that, when you're not sure which direction to move, right? Just let's explore the idea of what might be possible as a place for you to expand.
Yeah. And what's so beautiful and wise about what you offered, and something that I really strive to use in my practice as well, is one, to move against deprivation. I mean, I think sometimes when we want to make a change in our life, it's often like, well, I need to eliminate this, and I need to cleanse this, and I need to get rid of this. And it can seem quite overwhelming, because all of those elements are what make the tapestry of our life as it is, even if we know we would like a change. But it's like the path of 1,000 steps starts with one step. And so in those moments, and I can remember, I didn't really expect to be sharing so many personal stories, but I can actually remember so vividly a call that I was having with my mom when she got divorced. And she entered into this just abyss of, she would call at me and just, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And it was like it became her mantra. I don't know what to do. I don't know what. Yeah. And I remember just saying to her every time, let's just choose one thing. Like maybe you don't know where you want to live. Maybe you don't know what work you're going to do. Maybe you don't know what your life is going to, but can we just make one small shift? Like this is something you're going to do every day. Or maybe you all have always wanted to volunteer. So you're just going to start to prepare your resume. You know, let's just have one thing that you're doing, because that keeps movement. But if you stay in the thinking process, right, of what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And just like the beautiful example you gave too, right? Can we just open, not even a door, maybe not even a window, like, you know, imagine on a sailboat, just the little like little rectangle, right? Yeah. Like, is there just one little space that we can open that keeps us moving in some direction? And the beauty of that is that if we approach even that process with kindness, that even if it's the wrong step, it's still okay, because it's a step. Yeah. And you'll never know it's the wrong step unless you take it. And that was part of the conversation with my mom. She's like, well, what if it's not the right choice? I said, who cares? Right. It's a choice. Yeah. And it is a movement. Do you want to stay in this abyss with nothing? Or do you want to take a step that's going to enlighten you to, even if it's wrong, you've learned something. Right. And that's amazing, because then you know the next choice is more well-informed. But it doesn't have to be grandiose. And this is, you know, I guess another holiday thing. I have to admit to you, I hate New Year's resolutions. Sure. I do. I like daily resolutions. I like intentions. I like, well, in the yogic tradition, we actually call them sankalpa, which is kind of, there's a beautiful but very subtle difference, because when an intention, what is it? It's like a hope or a dream, isn't it? I intend to do something, like I'm going to do something, but maybe tomorrow. And a sankalpa instead is an affirmation, right? Like I want peace in my life. Okay, so that's great. I am peace. And there's a really powerful difference between this, right? But just that celebration of, okay, maybe it's a ritual to set New Year's resolutions. Okay, I get it, and it's fun. But how are you going to keep that resolution alive each day? What tool are you going to have? What small step are you going to take to understand whether that was a good choice or a bad choice?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other kind of conversation. Just like, you know, good, bad, and the right and wrong choice. Right, you know, right. Yeah, it's movement, you know, and yeah, that's huge. Yeah. Wow, I just totally blanked. I had this amazing question I was going to ask you. And here we are in the moment. Talking about baby steps, because so maybe just take a baby step in the direction of what question that was. Oh, I know. I was thinking about pain. Yeah. That's what it was. And it's that same, you know, I've seen it clinically forever. You know, just people coming in and identifying, you know, basically saying, I am pain. Yeah. You know, it's like my pain, my pain, my pain, my pain. They just own it, you know, and they're in that space. And it's like, well, maybe you're more than that. Maybe the pain is just an experience for now. Yeah. You know? And in that identification, so, I mean, two interesting things come up for me. Before, when you mentioned, well, you're a Buddhist, it's so funny because I struggle with saying I am a Buddhist. Well, you said it yesterday. That's why I had no idea. But in the class, I said it. Right. And the minute I said it, I was like, oh, that right. And it is true. Like, a given, if someone really wanted to know that question, yes, I follow the Buddhist life. I mean, I also say I'm a yogi. You know, I follow well, Buddhist yoga is pretty much are similar. They're sister philosophies that walk the same path with a few extraneous different things. But it's so interesting because there's a part of my brain that's like, I don't want to label myself. And yet, you know, there is also that obnoxious thing of not ever putting a term to something, which we have to do to live in society together, to have some sort of understanding. But I just wanted to joke with myself about that because yes, I say I'm a Buddhist, but also I mean, I'm not a Buddhist. I
live according to the teachings of Buddhism.
Yeah.
Which, in my mind, keeps it an alive conversation, not just a shell that I put on myself and that's my label and so that's what I do. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just an internal conversation that's happening in my head all the time. But the same with pain, right? So many people with pain, with discomfort, with dis-ease. But I have to tell you that one of the biggest, most enormous lessons that I had when I started practicing medicine, and I'm certain that you have had this over and over as well, is I discovered that it is really scary for people to lose that identification. They obviously come because there's discomfort, because there's something that's not going well. But the thing that we often overlook is that we're never out of relationship with everything around us. And so as a state of dis-ease or as a state of pain progresses, we're constantly making decisions about everything else we're relating to: our job, our marriage, how we get in our car, what exercise program we do. Everything is based on our perception of this label of pain. And the minute that begins to shift, even if it's for the better, there comes this enormous responsibility of also having to allow everything else to shift and reassimilate to a new state of being. And it's not an easy endeavor. And that's why it's wonderful to have facilitators, right, that can also just be there. It's wonderful to have support systems. And I'm just going to say it again, even though I feel like I say it 100 times a day, practices and rituals that help to ground us and ballast us through these processes. But it is an incredible thing when we allow ourselves to fall into a label like this, because we're not always conscientious of that, the spider web of that, or the really pervasive connection from that pinpoint of what we've decided we are is connected to everything around us. And so if one thing shifts, everything else has to subtly, we have to allow, I'm going to say, everything else to shift so that it stays in an honest relationship with whatever is the honesty of what we're willing to recognize.
Totally. I'm nodding my head vigorously.
You are.
Yeah. Because I'm totally feeling it. I mean, it's like, this is the thing, you know, and I think I had a podcast on it a long time ago when I was like talking about my own health and healing journey. But it's, you know, there's comes a point where we have to be willing to become somebody else. You know, it's like if I kept identifying myself as like, I am sick, you know, then who am I healthy? Like I'm a different person who labels and identifies himself as differently. Yeah. And to be, you know, this idea of ownership is something that I like to think a lot about too, you know, which is like, what is it that I'm claiming? And I've told this story before, but it strikes me here too, where I remember when I was going through the divorce, one of my mentors was, she was gracious and just hearing me kind of complain, you know, and I was like, my ex this and my soon to be ex that and whatever. And she was just like, she's not yours. She's not your ex. She was never your wife. She's not going to be your ex-wife. She's who she is, you know? And I was like, what? And then I was like, my money this. And she's like, it's not your money.
It's just money.
Like you have access to a certain thing and energy. And when you're dead, it's gone. Like it's not yours. And, you know, I spent a lot of time thinking about that and catching myself anytime I say you know, even with Jen, it's like, I'm really hyper conscious of not referring all the time. And if I am going to say it, I'm going to be like really aware of like my wife, you know? Yeah. And I used to joke with this woman. I was like, well, you're married. Like when you're at a party, you know, and you want to talk about like your husband who's like at the other end of the room to people. And you're like, you know, I was like, you know, my partner, it makes you sound like, you know, that's not necessarily our best word choice. It's like, how do you refer to him?
So many politically correct variations.
Like, she was like, I just call him by his name. He's not my anything. And it just was like, oh, duh, you know, and it was like, oh, I get it, you know, and then there's like I've come to understand, or I think I understand, you know, I get these little epiphanies or whatever around that, but it's being able to, for me, especially when it comes to relationships, like even with Wyatt, you know, it's like, I try not to say my son, you know, because like, yeah, he is, but he's also like him.
Yeah.
And if I can see him as him, especially if things are heightened, right? Instead of it being like my son, like my dad has said this shit to me, my son wouldn't behave this way. And it's like, well, I'm your son, like, fuck you, you know?
Right.
I am behaving this way and like whatever, you know, but it's like when you can get out of that and just be like, no, this is like a little human having an experience, you know, or like, this is Jen, not like my anything, not in relationship to me. You know, it's like it kind of goes back to that suffering thing too. You know, where it's like it's nothing that she's doing is intentional, like to hurt me or whatever. It's like, you know, we're just doing what we're doing,
right?
But there seems to be something that with the possessive, of the there's like this identification thing that happens that can just things get a little weird.
Well, and this is like a huge topic, right? Because it's really then on the topic of attachment, which is a huge teaching in both Buddhism and yogic philosophy, is the practice of non-attachment. And I mean, there's, you know, just to soften a little bit, because the point you're making is so valid and so wise and so strong, but of course, Wyatt is your son. Right. You created him. You are the facilitator of him being in this life, but that label of my brings our mind into some kind of belief that seems unchangeable. And this is where, and I talked about this recently too. I think one of perhaps my English is going to go out the door right now. I'm thinking in Italian. Ted Kapchuk spoke at the Pacific Symposium last year. So this is a traditional Chinese medical symposium where practitioners meet and continue our education. And he was giving a lecture, and this man, right, he's a legend. And I was so moved because one of the things that he said a couple of times is he said, I'm certain that I'm right, but maybe I'm not. And it was so, and I'm sorry because I was just talking about this also, I think on another interview, but it's like, this has been almost like a motto for me since I heard it. Something about it was so incredibly touching because of exactly this. Like, yes, Wyatt is your son, but he isn't yours. Right? Exactly. And how do we keep this conversation? Because everything in life is a relationship. But if we forget that relationship can change, whether it's actually the relationship or whether it's just our perspective on the relationship, right? Whether it's to ourselves, whether it's to our thoughts, whether it's to another person, whether it's to a label, if we can kind of keep both of those players in the court at the same time, because we have to choose. At some point in life, you have to choose. If we just waddled around saying, I'm detached, then probably life wouldn't work so well as a society, right? We kind of have to put some boundaries somewhere in order for us to live in this way that we're living in this life as human beings and as animal populations, right? There's a lot of evidence for this there too. But if we can keep that window open of this is how I'm perceiving it now, and I understand that life is change. So can I see with the best honesty that I know how in this moment? And can I also understand that my opinion or my belief or my perspective might change as the experience of life and the information coming to me also changes? And what I love also about what this thing that Ted said has in it is this idea of forgiveness. And that is, I think that we cause ourselves a lot of suffering when we decide we believe something and we're living our lives based on that. And then something happens, whether it's a ritual, a ceremony, a good yoga class, reading a good book, it can be, inspiration is endless in life, that opens our mind to the fact that maybe that belief isn't so sound according to who we are or what is around us in life. Can we let that go softly and say, oh, look, now I have new information, so I just need to change my mind. And I did the best I could then, right? I did the best I could when I was saying my Wyatt, my son. Right. And now when I say, Wyatt, this is also a really good choice because I have new information. And so there's this really beautiful dichotomy, and this is really the whole of yoga is union, is unification of these dualities, that when we get polarized in life, this is when we experience a great deal of suffering, right? But can we recognize to the best of our ability, with as much honesty as is available to us any given situation, but can we also keep a window open that says, I also understand that this might change, and when it does, I'm going to do that as gracefully as possible and just accept the new version.
It reminds me of one of my favorite Alan Watts quotes, which is something like, you're under no obligation to be now how you were yesterday, or who you were yesterday.
Yeah.
Or I think the quote might even be like who you were an hour ago.
Yeah.
You know, it's
yeah.
like,
I mean, sometimes it's that fast, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's, again, like to bring it back to where we started with the ceremonies, and especially like an ayahuasca experience.
Yeah.
It's just like that has a way of kind of at least my one experience has a way of moving through kind of the constructed identities, of like, who do I think I am?
Yeah. And I guess the other thing to celebrate is that I've had patients and students ask me over the years, like, well, if I'm always changing, then who am I? Who are you, Jim? Knowing that the kind of husband you were with your first wife isn't the kind of husband, like, who are you? What does that mean? Does that mean that you're actually nothing or nobody, or right? And getting back to the theme of music is that the way that I really see human beings is that we're each just this beautiful, unique symphony of vibrations. And that is unique. It is, each of us is really a unique symphony, a unique piece of music being played in this life. And there is something about that unique compilation. In traditional Chinese medicine, we might designate that as like our elemental designation, or, in all the different traditions, we can actually put words or concepts to that. But just thinking about each of us as this really unique symphony, the foundation of that doesn't really change. It's just how we decide to relate to it, how we decide to manifest it, how we decide to put it in action that is always changing, and everything around us. And I somehow find this way of thinking about it settling, because if I think like I'm actually nothing, it's kind of disorienting, but like we were talking about it yesterday in the class, like one thing I know for sure is I have a body. I can't really deny that this physical thing is sitting on this couch. I can touch it, I can squeeze it, I can make sensations. All of the other aspects of my existence are okay. I'm discovering because I can't really touch them. But for me, there's something heartening in thinking that there is a unique manifestation of life that exists that right now is called Molly. And the potential of that to manifest, morph, change, find infinite number of perspectives in life is also a part.
I like it. I like that. And that's where, like, for me, one of the biggest shifts has been, if you'd asked me 15 years ago, who am I? I would immediately go to accomplishments. What I've achieved or what I hope to achieve. And I'm I don't know if you know the Enneagram system, like I'm a 3, so it's like we're just all about achievement. Wood in Chinese medicine, so it's the same shit, Leo, like
go,
5
vision.
things, it's just all there. I mean, it's like all goes in that direction. And so like, but the shifting it, finally sort of making peace with that, and then getting to a place of like, it's not about achievement, but it's like if I can be a continual sort of contributor of kindness, if that can be like the main sort of refrain on the song of Jim, then like that's pretty good. Like
that's amazing.
I finally was like, okay, I get it now. It's like if kindness, bring a good mood, be present, like all of that stuff. But it's like if I can come back to that, like that's cool. Like I would feel really good about that. Like when I'm dead and people are like, oh yeah, like he brought kindness and it was there and like heart and like, okay, cool. Like that's where before it was always like, what have I achieved?
And as a wood and as a Leo and as a 3, probably contributing that kindness to yourself is
huge. I mean, that's everything, right? I mean, that's the whole premise. It's like, it's like bringing that
just
good
saying.
mood. Yeah, for sure. No, it's
to output it is an achievement, isn't
right.
it? But to actually
to be there,
gift that also to your own efforts is something quite phenomenal.
For sure. Absolutely. That's the problem I have with people who are just like, my life is to be of service, because it's like to be of service, or like the one that really kind of, because I used to think this way, is like when people are like, oh, my purpose is to empower others. It's like, okay, cool. Let's take a look at that. So that means in order for you to fulfill your purpose, you got to be surrounded by people who are disempowered. You got to hope that they listen to you. You got to hope that they give gratitude for what you've said, and then they implement whatever you've said, and that then they feel empowered, and that somehow you hear about it again. It's like, that's like 6-7 steps in order for you to feel like you fulfilled your purpose.
Right.
But for me, I've simplified it because sometimes I'm a moron, especially when I get like heated emotionally.
I've never known you to be a moron, just by the way.
I gotta just like keep it. I gotta keep it like really simple, because otherwise I can just get like out there really sort of heady and whatever. To just be like, did I bring a good mood? Was I giving a good mood and being kind to myself? Like if there's no one around, like check, awesome. I said, I laughed. My brothers joke that I'm like my favorite comedian. It's like, I think I'm funny, and so it's like, did I bring a good mood here? And then did I bring a good mood when other people were there?
Yeah.
And that shift away from like just being of service or empowering others, has been really helpful for me.
But what's so incredible about that simplifying, and I'm a huge advocate for simplification. This is, I think, my whole life's work is just helping people to simplify. I don't know. I would live, actually, my old roommate, I was just visiting her in Puglia, and she reminded me, she was like, when we moved in together, it was incredible because you had a chair, some plants, and a yoga mat and a bed. And I said, yeah. Like, what else do you need in a house? Anything else would have been clutter in my, in my mind. But this is just my own kind of mania. But what is so beautiful about simplifying is that I think it's easy. And, the example that you give is someone who wants to be of service to people. And in my mind, the greatest service that we can do ever is to walk the walk. Because if you are being kind to you, then anyone you interact with, you are going to bring a good mood, because you're going to invite them to do the same. And that is so powerful. And I know that in society, I mean, you're a practitioner, you're a coach, I'm a teacher. We have accepted these roles in life and chosen these roles in life where we are, in fact, trying to move groups of people in a certain way. And of course, there is a need for that, and there is a time and a place for that. But in the back of my mind, I suppose my own personal mantra, and the more that I walk through life, what I would love to see is that everyone is just walking the walk, right? Not saying the beautiful words, not, trying to move mountains for others, but the impact, and we've all felt it, right? You get next to someone who feels comfortable in their own skin and is just manifesting what they've chosen to believe. And as we've already talked about, like, that could change all the time, but in the moment you can feel, and I think in the modern world we call this authenticity, right? Which is another really sellable kind of fun word. But authenticity to me is just being your word. If I say this is what I believe, am I living that in everything that I do? And if I am, then I'm believable and I'm trustworthy, and therefore people feel good around me, right? They feel calm around me. They feel like there's something that resonates well. And if you add kindness into the mix, then you've really got some kind of incredible formula for just walking through your day. And I think more and more as I'm moving through my metamorphosis as a teacher, my metamorphosis as a healer, as a practitioner, that this is something that feels quite beautiful to me and quite accessible. Like, can we each just be the kindness? Can we each just walk the walk? And what kind of impact would that have? And
when you're leading your retreats, I mean, I mean, I love you. You're like super like well-spoken, and you have a huge heart. and then this incredible experience and knowledge base of yoga and movement and Chinese medicine and all that. So when you're leading your retreats, are you doing a combination of like movement with lectures and, you know, like holding some of these kind of dialogues, or is it just yoga, just movement?
Yeah. So, I mean, the retreats that I'm creating now are what I found over the course of these years that I have sort of transformed into a retreat leader, which honestly, I never even imagined. I think before I moved to Italy, I didn't even know that retreats existed, honestly. I mean, yes, some different kinds of retreats, but yoga retreats, the way that I'm doing them, I didn't even really know that they existed. And just through my own experience leading different kind of retreats, what I have found is that I have a really deep passion for bringing people to places that just by bringing them to that place starts a conversation by opening their perspective on life. And this is one of, I know that not everyone has easy access to moving around the world in the way that I do. I think it's a really special opportunity that I have right now, and I'm really grateful every day. But just stepping out of your norm, right, is one small practice. And we kind of joke about it. And I promise I'll get back to your question, but it kind of inspires, right, this simplification. And this is another kind of cliche, but can you just take a different road to work? Could one day you ride your bike instead of take your car, right? These are all ways that we can travel in life. And one of the biggest gifts that I have found about traveling around the world is this incredible insight that being in every different culture I've been in gives me to things that I didn't even know I had made decisions about: love, success, achievement. Every new place that I go has their version of what that is. And not to say that the people there aren't also struggling the same way you or I might, like you with your achievement. Do I need to achieve all the time? Of course, these populations are having this human experience, but the gift is that my version of success is completely different than the version of success of a person in Nepal. And so that opens my world and my mind to something. So all of this to say that when I'm leading retreats, we use the physical practice of yoga as well as the meditative practices of yoga. So not even always physical. I mean, when I take people trekking in Nepal, we're trekking in the Himalaya for 6 hours a day. I'm certainly not going to lead a dynamic flow class at the end because we wouldn't be walking anymore, right? So we sit on the beds and we do meditations. But the point is that this practice of yoga becomes a through line for the experience. It becomes a collective effort, almost like a ceremony, right? The practice becomes the communal effort and the communal gathering in and amongst an experience that every individual in the retreat is receiving in a slightly different way. And so we use the practices, one, as a through line, two, as a connecting force for the experience of the group, three, as a way to hopefully help people to feel like they have real tools after the experience as they're re-entering life, which can also be almost as big a shock as coming to a new experience. When we come back to life and we feel like we've had a transformational experience, sometimes it's really shocking to understand how to hold on to that when our environment hasn't changed, when our partner maybe hasn't been on the trip with us, when our students have no idea where Nepal is on the map or anything about it. I keep saying Nepal, but it's it's one of the sort of more magnificent trips that I've done, I suppose, in the last few years. So all of this to say that I suppose that I draw on all of these different disciplines that I've studied and that I practice in different ways according to what is needed. And another reason that I love traveling in this way is that they sort of provide a digestive factor and a mindfulness factor, right? So that we're not just being carried away by the grandiose nature of being in a third world country, but every day we're pausing together and saying, this is where we are, this is what it smells like, these are the sounds around us, and this is what it's meaning to me in any given moment. And the real beauty of humanity, right, is that every group of people is so different. Even sometimes I have people that come, I have a woman who's now coming on her 5th retreat with me, all different. She chooses, different ones, but so I know her well and I know her personality well, but each new group she's in brings out a different part of her. Yeah. And of course, as these individuals come together, right, it creates a completely different dynamic. And so this is also part of my own personal practice in leading these retreats, is that I have to stay present enough to listen to what is forming in front of me and to choose as wisely as I can from the different practices to help guide the experience of the group. But the real conversations come in the experiences that we do on the retreats. And that is so personal. In Nepal, we're trekking through the Himalaya. I had 2 years ago this beautiful woman that I met in India. A handful of years ago, we share a teacher in India. And we were fast friends immediately. And then she came on this journey to Nepal with me. And she's in her 60s and she's very well and healthy, but not like a hardy person, right? And every day she was 2 hours behind the rest of the group trekking.
Wow.
And I think it's been 3 years since she's been on this journey. And every time we get together, she's still digesting the meaning of it, tears. So I have the most amazing porters and guides that I use in Nepal. So of course someone was always with her,
yeah.
But what she confronted on that journey was obviously completely different than some of the, had a young 20-year-old in the same who was like running to the next village, like could care less about the journey and, and all of this. So again, the yoga really becomes the cohesiveness of the group. But what I try to do when I take people into these places that maybe they wouldn't otherwise go is I try to get them intimately connected with the people, with the culture, and I try to plan activities within which each person can really have the journey that they need to have.
Amazing. Where's your next retreat? You're going to Patagonia.
Patagonia, yes.
When is that?
I wish they could see my smile. I love Patagonia. I have completely fallen in love with this part of the world. So this retreat starts on February 28th. Nice. It's in the north part of Chilean Patagonia. And there is a little bit of unrest in the country, but the areas that we're going to are not affected. And I have friends and people and guides on the ground in Santiago and at every step of the way. And I feel really confident and safe also that the country and the people are going to be in resolution soon, or at least that's my hope for my friends there. But what I love about Patagonia is that it really... So one of the most powerful things is I love traveling to India and Nepal because the spirituality of these countries is in your face. You can't go and not question in some way what it is that you believe, because every person, sound, image, right? It's everywhere. You're surrounded by belief and philosophy and images of this and symbolism of this and rituals of this, the chanting, the lighting of the butter lamps, the spinning of the gompas that, it's everywhere. And of course, that creates this really spiritually charged sensation so far everyone I've taken to Nepal in their own special way has this feeling. And what was so special for me about going to Patagonia is that it is nature, raw, like untouched, unmanipulated, uncultivated. And the minute I arrived in Patagonia, I had the exact same feeling of this just deep spiritual connection. And of course, you and I, as traditional Chinese medical practitioners, we have this other logical side that says, of course, because we are the elements. Right. And so the minute we immerse ourselves in nature, there's a healing element to that because we're reminded of what our natural rhythms are. We're reminded about how these elements tend to interact with one another. And it gives us such a beautiful wisdom, right? Without even needing to describe anything. You feel it, you touch it, you smell it, your feet are on the earth, your face is in the sun or in the wind or what. Patagonia is so alive that it can snow 1 minute and be 80 degrees and sunny the next minute. And that's also a part of the adventure of it. But this particular retreat at the end of February is in a place of Patagonia that there are, I have never seen another tourist.
Wow.
And so also for me, this is a very special opportunity and a little bit different than many of my other retreats where I'm really trying to introduce people to new cultures, is that this particular retreat is a real opportunity to quiet down the chatter of the modern world and really return to another, I guess, catchphrase in our modern world, like true nature. But it really, like, this is actually true nature. And it invites us to reconnect with perhaps what our true nature is. And we're doing really fun things, rafting and horseback riding and hiking and meeting with local artisans. And I have a beautiful shaman that comes and sits with my groups, and we're practicing yoga in the morning and some restorative meditation, song, chanting, bhakti yoga in the evening, depending on the energy of the group. But it's a pretty magnificent opportunity to see a part of the world where nature is really herself. And feeling that and being part of that, and then also being able to sort of listen to and feel how maybe we have detached ourselves from that is a really magnificent opportunity.
Coming home.
It is a coming home. Oh, that's a beautiful way to put it. It is
Sign
a coming
me up.
home.
I'm into it.
Please, you're invited. I have a spot for you. I've got a few more spots. So
nice.
I hope you'll join.
How can the people get in touch with you?
So my website is inspirationheals.com. Just as you would normally spell it in English, inspiration, HEALS.com, if you're an Italian happening to listen to this, or .com as an English speaker. Right. And they get a little fused in my head these days.
Because you have a great newsletter, so they can sign up for your newsletter there?
Yep. Okay. When you go to the website for the first time, you have an opt-in for the newsletter. If that interests you, you can find me on Instagram as Inspiration Heals. You can find me on Facebook as Molly Cofman, Cofman. And in all those places, you have access to email, and that's also a really nice way to communicate with me. Questions, thoughts, feedback, anything. I love communicating. I love learning. I love hearing what's going on in everyone's world so that I can continue to learn and create experiences that are impactful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Check her out, guys. Thank you so much for being here. It's so good to be connecting with you.
So good to be with you today.
She came all the way from Italy to be here. So thank you for making the trek. And for you guys listening, thank you so much. As always, spread the love. Share the podcast with someone that you know that needs a trip to Patagonia.
And be kind.
Let's not be assholes, okay? All right, we'll catch you next time.